The Roman tomb had slept in silence beneath the market for nearly 2,000 years. Thousands of footsteps pounded above it, daily shoppers haggling, children running, merchants shouting prices for fruit and fish. But no one suspected that directly under their heels lay an untouched chamber of stone and secrets. No one, that is, until a young archaeologist named Marcus Petronius placed his palm against the earth and felt it tremble back. He had been wandering the market, more from habit than purpose, his satchel bulging with half-read journals and sketches of forgotten ruins. Marcus was 28, a graduate but hardly celebrated. His colleagues at the university regarded him as little more than an eager assistant, useful for cataloging shards or brushing dust from relics. To them, his youth was evidence of naivety. To Marcus, it was a curse and a blessing. He had years ahead to prove them wrong. But until then, he endured their arrogance. That afternoon, as the vendors shouted and donkeys brayed, Marcus paused by a section of uneven cobblestones. There was a hollow resonance beneath his boots, faint but unmistakable. He crouched, pressed his hand against the ground, and again the faint echo answered him like a muffled heartbeat. His chest tightened. This was no ordinary foundation. Something was sealed below. But who would believe him? At the university, Professor Varro had already dismissed Marcus more than once. Varro, silver-haired and sharp-tongued, carried himself like the very embodiment of Rome's grandeur. He tolerated Marcus only because the younger man's diligence relieved him of menial tasks. To Varro, Marcus's ideas were nothing but the feverish dreams of a boy desperate for recognition. And yet, standing in the marketplace with the dust of olives and figs in the air, Marcus felt a conviction rise in him that drowned out the noise of doubt. He remembered his grandfather's tales, whispered after wine had loosened his tongue, of a lost burial vault constructed for a Roman noble who had crossed the Senate. The emperor ordered his name stricken from every record, his existence erased, his tomb hidden where no chronicler might find it. Marcus's fingers trembled as he traced a faint carving on the stone wall that bordered the market. The inscription was worn, nearly invisible, but to trained eyes it was the spiral symbol of damnatio memoriae, Rome's cruel decree of erasure. His breath caught. Could it be true? In that moment, he was not merely a boy in dusty boots. He was the lone guardian of a truth buried in silence, waiting to surface. But his mind was torn between ambition and fear. If he was wrong, he would be mocked beyond redemption. If he was right, he would shake the foundations of history. He rose, dusted his knees, and stood taller than he had in years. "I will uncover it," he whispered to himself, his voice nearly lost among the shouts of the fishmongers. At that very instant, Professor Varro's voice cut through the marketplace like a blade. "Petronius! Still chasing ghosts, are you?" The older man stood with his entourage of students, his expression curved in disdain. Marcus felt heat rush to his face, but he did not bow. "There's something beneath these stones, Professor. Something sealed." The crowd of Varro's followers chuckled. One muttered, "Perhaps a sewer rat's nest." Another snickered, "Or Marcus's career already buried." But Marcus did not waver. His hand returned to the ground, steady and sure. "Mark my words. When this tomb opens, Rome itself will speak again." The professor sneered, but for the first time, there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. If you're enjoying this story of justice and hidden strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of prejudice turned into the most valuable lesson of Professor Varro's life. And with that, Marcus's fate was sealed as surely as the stones beneath his feet. For arrogance had laughed in his face, but soon the earth itself would answer. The jeers lingered long after Professor Varro and his students drifted away into the crowd, their laughter mingling with the calls of merchants hawking dates and pomegranates. Marcus remained standing over the uneven stones, fists clenched at his sides. He told himself their mockery meant nothing, yet every sneer burned like a brand. He had been through this before. Dismissed, ignored, Humiliated, but never had his conviction been stronger. This time, he was certain. That evening, Marcus presented his findings to the faculty council. The room was lined with oil lamps, their flickering light illuminating rows of marble busts, staring down in silent judgment. His sketches and notes were spread across the table. Diagrams of the hollow vibrations, transcriptions of the faded spiral symbol, his own annotations connecting it to Roman laws of erasure. Professor Varro sat at the head of the council, his arms crossed. He barely glanced at Marcus's work. A hollow sound beneath a marketplace? Child's play. Do you imagine every echo leads to a noble's tomb? His voice dripped disdain. Marcus swallowed. With respect, sir, the symbol I traced matches those found in decrees of damnatio memoriae. This could be evidence of a noble whose very memory was condemned. To find such a tomb, Varro slammed a hand on the table, cutting him short, would require evidence, not childish conjecture. He turned to the council. We are scholars, not treasure hunters. I will not waste resources on a boy's fantasy. The other professors shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged glances, yet none dared challenge Varro's authority. Marcus felt their silence as a knife in his back. Sir, Marcus said, his voice tightening, what if I am right? Varro leaned forward, his eyes cold. And what if you are wrong? You would drag the name of this institution into the mud, chasing shadows. You risk turning history into farce. The words landed heavy. For a moment, Marcus faltered. Doubt coiled through his chest, whispering that perhaps he was nothing more than a foolish boy tilting at ruins. Yet beneath that doubt smoldered something stronger. The memory of his grandfather's voice, telling tales of Rome's secrets. The conviction that the past yearned to be heard. Marcus bowed stiffly. Then I will dig alone. A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the chamber, led by Varro himself. Dig? With what? Your bare hands? He dismissed Marcus with a wave. Leave us. When you are ready to abandon fantasies and learn true scholarship, perhaps then you may return. The dismissal stung, but Marcus's resolve hardened. He left the chamber, his heart thundering, every step echoing with determination. That night, he stood again in the marketplace. Lantern in hand, he traced the faint symbols on the wall. The air was cooler, the market empty, yet the stones seemed alive beneath him. As though aware of his presence, he whispered into the silence. They will see. I will prove it. Far above him, in the faculty hall, Varro sat alone. Though he had mocked Marcus publicly, the symbol gnawed at his mind. Damnatio memoriae was rare, reserved for traitors or rivals too dangerous to name. Could the boy truly have stumbled upon something more? Varro's pride hissed against the thought. No, impossible. And yet, unease lingered in his chest like a thorn. Marcus knew none of this. He only knew that he was alone, his lantern casting long shadows across the market stones. Alone, but not defeated. Marcus returned the next day with a pickaxe borrowed from a friend in the city works, his satchel crammed with notebooks and chalk. The sun was just beginning to climb, yet already the market filled with vendors arranging baskets of olives and figs. To the merchants, Marcus looked like a foolish scholar, pretending to be a laborer. They chuckled as he knelt by the cobblestones and tapped them, ear bent close to the earth as though listening for whispers. But Marcus didn't care. The hollow resonance was still there, beating faintly beneath him like the pulse of the earth itself. He struck carefully, chipping away at the mortar between stones. Each tap echoed louder than the last, drawing curious onlookers who paused with baskets in hand. Some shook their heads, muttering that the young man was possessed. Others laughed outright, tossing coins at his feet as though he were some street performer. By midday, sweat soaked his shirt and dust clung to his face. At last, one of the larger stones loosened with a groan, revealing a thin draft of air that kissed his skin. Marcus froze. This was it, the breath of something sealed away for centuries. He pressed his lantern close and saw faint markings etched along the edge of the cavity, nearly erased by time. He traced them with trembling fingers, spirals, broken lines, fragments of words in archaic Latin. His heart pounded. This was no cellar, no sewer. It was a message left by hands that had defied oblivion. "Fool's errand," came a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Professor Varro, flanked by two of his favored students. The old man's eyes glittered with condescension. "Do you fancy yourself Romulus, founding a new city with your pickaxe? This is nothing but rubble." Marcus straightened, dust streaking his face, lantern still clutched tight. "Look for yourself, Professor. The markings are clear." One of the students crouched, peering into the crack, then whispered something to Varro. The professor's jaw tightened. He saw it too, the unmistakable signs of inscription. Yet his pride would not yield. "A coincidence," he snapped. "Some mason's idle carving. Do not disgrace our discipline with your childish fantasies." Marcus's voice steadied, firm and resonant. "I will not walk away, sir. These stones guard a passage, and I intend to find where it leads." Varro's lips curled. "Then when the ground collapses and buries you, let it be your epitaph." He turned on his heel and strode off, his students trailing behind. But Marcus caught the flicker in his eyes again, that unease, that fear that the boy might be right. As dusk fell, the market emptied. Marcus alone remained, kneeling by the opening, whispering to the darkness. He wedged his lantern into the cavity, illuminating a sloping passage hidden beneath layers of earth. The air wafting from it was dry, ancient, tinged with the scent of dust that had lain undisturbed for centuries. His chest tightened. This was it, the path to a truth Rome had tried to bury. He knew the dangers: collapse, disease, ridicule if nothing lay beyond. Yet a fiercer voice within him urged forward. If you do not step in, no one ever will. With a steadying breath, Marcus pried the opening wider. Stones groaned, dust rained down, and at last, a space wide enough for his body emerged. He set one foot into the darkness, his lantern flickering. Above, the night sky glimmered faintly, but Marcus descended, heart racing, into the passage that would alter not only his fate, but the memory of Rome itself. The passage sloped downward, swallowing Marcus in its narrow throat of stone. Each step was cautious, his lantern casting weak pools of light along the rough walls. Dust rained down with every movement, and the air grew colder, heavier, as though each breath pulled history itself into his lungs. The silence was total. No footsteps from above, no murmur of the marketplace, only the faint echo of his own heart pounding in his ears. He brushed his fingers against the walls, tracing carvings half lost to time. Spirals, broken figures, fragments of words. His training told him these were funerary symbols, yet their style was unusual. They lacked the pompous flourishes of standard Roman epitaphs. Instead, they seemed hurried, almost desperate, as though the masons themselves feared discovery. At the bottom of the slope, the passage widened into a small antechamber. The air was so stale that Marcus gagged, clutching his lantern tighter. Before him loomed a sealed stone door, its edges fused with mortar that had hardened like iron. Across its face was carved a Latin phrase so faint it nearly dissolved in the flicker of the flame. "Let silence guard the condemned." His pulse quickened. This was it, the vault his grandfather had whispered about, the tomb of one erased from memory. His hands trembled as he laid the lantern down and brushed the inscriptions clean. "Silence, guard the condemned." Rome had buried this noble not merely in earth, but in shame. For a moment, fear seized him. What right did he have to break this seal, to disturb a soul deliberately exiled from history? He thought of Professor Varro's words, mocking, dismissive, laced with contempt. And he thought of his grandfather's eyes, gleaming with pride as he spoke of truths hidden by the powerful. "History belongs to all," Marcus whispered. "Even the forgotten." He set to work. Using a chisel and the borrowed pickaxe, he hammered at the hardened mortar. The blows echoed like thunder in the chamber, each strike breaking a silence that had endured 2 millennia. Sweat drenched him. Dust choked him. But he pressed on, driven by something greater than ambition, a need to prove that the past could not be buried forever. At last, a hairline crack split across the stone. A sudden hiss of air escaped, dry and heavy, as though the tomb itself exhaled after centuries of suffocation. Marcus stumbled back, lantern flickering wildly. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard a voice whisper through the crack, a sigh of sorrow or warning. His rational mind told him it was nothing but the rush of ancient air, but his heart knew better. With a final heave, the door shifted. Dust poured down as the seal groaned open, inch by inch. Then, with a shudder, the heavy slab gave way, revealing darkness beyond. Marcus lifted his lantern and stepped inside. The tomb opened into a chamber vast and solemn. The walls were lined with faded frescoes, their colors muted, but their forms still discernible. Scenes of battle, triumph, and exile. Golden torches lay toppled, their flames long extinguished. At the center, upon a cracked marble dais, rested a stone sarcophagus. Its lid was untouched, the carvings sharp, untouched by thieves. Around it lay scattered offerings, urns, coins, fragments of armor, all coated in the same thick dust. Marcus's breath caught. Everything here was pristine, undisturbed. Unlike so many Roman tombs plundered in antiquity, this one was sealed whole. He was the first to stand here since the day it was closed. He approached slowly, reverently, his lantern throwing light across the sarcophagus. The carvings depicted a man in armor, his features regal but stern. Yet where a name should have been etched, there was only a violent slash chiseled away, erased forever. Marcus whispered, "Who were you?" His voice trembled in the chamber, swallowed by silence. The lantern flame flickered, and for an instant, it seemed the carved eyes stared back at him. Marcus stood frozen before the sarcophagus, the lantern trembling in his grasp. Every instinct told him this discovery was monumental, yet with the awe came dread, a gnawing sense that he had trespassed where no man was meant to tread. The erasure of the name was deliberate, absolute. Rome had intended this noble to vanish, not merely in body but in memory. He circled the dais slowly, examining the scattered offerings. The urns bore faint engravings, too worn to decipher fully. The coins, however, startled him, minted with the visage of emperors long before the date of the tomb's style. That alone was odd. Funerary offerings were usually contemporary, not ancient relics. Why bury someone with coins from rulers past? His lantern light fell on a slab at the base of the sarcophagus, half buried in dust. He brushed it clean, revealing words carved in haste. "Beware the forgotten heir, his name shall unmake empires." Marcus's blood chilled. Forgotten heir? Unmake empires? This was no common noble. Whoever lay inside had posed such a threat to Rome that his memory was cursed. He staggered back, his heart racing. His mind conjured the stories his grandfather had whispered, of a rival claimant to the throne, disinherited and condemned, who swore vengeance from beyond the grave. He had always thought them myths, legends woven to frighten children. But here, in stone, was proof. His thoughts spiraled. If I reveal this, what will it mean? Will I be hailed for unearthing truth, or cursed for reviving a legacy Rome itself wanted dead? The weight of choice pressed on him. He leaned against the wall, the fresco at his back. The paintings were clearer here. Soldiers kneeling, a figure crowned, then struck down, his face chiseled away by deliberate hands. Marcus's eyes burned. He could almost hear the voices of those ancient artisans, forced to deface what they had once honored. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the passage, the shuffle of feet, the clink of metal. Marcus's head whipped toward the entrance. The lantern flickered wildly, shadows stretching. "Petronius?" a voice called. Low, mocking. Marcus's stomach dropped. "Professor Varro." The old man stepped into the chamber, two students trailing him, their faces pale in the dim light. Varro's eyes narrowed as he took in the frescoes, the sarcophagus, the untouched offerings. His lips parted in disbelief. but he quickly masked it with scorn. So, the boy actually found something. His tone was sharp, but his trembling hands betrayed him. Marcus straightened. This is no ordinary tomb, Professor. This man was erased, condemned as a forgotten heir. Look, he pointed to the inscription. Varro read, his face blanching. For the first time, Marcus saw fear pierce the professor's arrogance. Yet it lasted only a heartbeat before pride smothered it. You will step aside, Varro hissed, voice low but firm. This discovery belongs not to a child, but to Rome's true scholars. Do you think history will remember your name? Number. It will remember mine. Marcus's fists clenched. He saw it, then Varro wasn't merely dismissive. He was envious, desperate to seize what he had mocked. This tomb will not be yours to twist, Marcus said, his voice steady though his chest roared with fear. It belongs to truth. Varro's eyes darkened. He leaned close, whispering with venom. Truth is written by those who hold the pen. And I hold it, boy. Marcus's heart pounded. Behind Varro's words, the sarcophagus loomed its silent occupant, watching, waiting, as though the fate of the forgotten heir was about to repeat itself in the present. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The flickering lantern light painted Professor Varro's lined face in stark shadows, his pride warring with the awe he could not quite conceal. Behind him, his two students stood rigid, their gazes fixed on the sarcophagus, as though afraid to blink. The silence in the tomb was suffocating, thick with the weight of centuries and with the clash of ambition and truth that now filled the chamber. Marcus forced himself to breathe steadily. His discovery was no longer his alone. Varro had seen too much, yet part of him almost welcomed it. Let the professor's pride be tested by what lay here. Let his arrogance face the undeniable. One of the students broke first. Professor, he whispered, voice trembling. This is untouched. The offerings, the frescoes, they're real. All of it. Varro snapped his head toward him, his eyes blazing. Silence. Do not be swayed by shadows and dust. But his tone lacked conviction. Marcus stepped closer to the sarcophagus, raising his lantern so the light fell fully on the carved effigy. You see it too, don't you? The name erased. The warnings carved in haste. This isn't just a noble. This was someone Rome feared enough to erase. Varro's lips pressed thin, but his eyes betrayed him. The pupils trembled, darting over the carvings as though devouring every forbidden detail. Then, with a sudden bark, he forced his voice steady. Nonsense. Some provincial rebel, nothing more. Rome erased countless pretenders. Marcus's patience snapped. His voice echoed, fierce and defiant. Then why seal him with treasures untouched? Why bury him in silence instead of shame? You know this is more than rebellion. This man was an heir, one Rome could not afford to name. The words hung heavy in the chamber, and for once, Varro did not answer. The other student, braver than the first, whispered, If this is true, history must be rewritten. His eyes widened, reflecting the flame. Professor, this changes everything. The professor's face hardened like stone. No, he said flatly. It changes nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. He turned sharply toward Marcus, pointing a shaking finger. You will tell no one of this, do you understand? No one. Marcus felt a fire ignite in his chest, brighter than the lantern flame. You cannot bury truth again. Rome tried once, and it failed. I won't let you repeat it. For a moment, Varro's mask cracked. Fear flickered in his eyes, raw and unguarded, before pride smothered it once more. He stepped forward, voice low and venomous. If you dare speak of this tomb, boy, you will ruin yourself. The council will destroy you. Your name will be laughed out of every hall. Marcus's pulse thundered, but he did not retreat. He thought of his grandfather's stories, of the conviction that had carried him this far. His voice came out firm, unyielding. Then let them laugh. Better mocked for truth than praised for silence. The students looked between them, torn, their faces pale. They had followed Varro for years, Yet here was a young man standing firm where their master wavered. Doubt began to creep into their eyes. Varro saw it. His jaw tightened, fury and panic colliding. He turned abruptly, striding toward the passage. "We are leaving," he snapped. "This place will remain sealed. If the boy wishes to bury himself here, let him." His footsteps echoed up the tunnel, the students hesitating before following reluctantly. Their lanterns faded into darkness until only Marcus remained. Alone, he stood before the sarcophagus once more. The carvings seemed to breathe in the flickering light, as if urging him forward. He placed his palm on the cold stone lid, whispering into the silence. "They wanted you forgotten, but I will remember." And for the first time since he had entered the tomb, Marcus felt not fear, but purpose. Marcus lingered long after Varro's footsteps faded, his hand still resting on the sarcophagus lid. The stone felt colder than the air, as though it held not just a body, but the weight of centuries of secrecy. He knew what had to come next. If the world was to believe, the tomb had to be opened, not merely glimpsed from outside, but revealed in full. And yet, he hesitated. To break the seal was to court betrayal. Varro would not remain silent. His pride would force him to claim ownership, to twist the truth, perhaps even to destroy it, rather than let Marcus rise from obscurity. The young archaeologist sat on the dusty dais, burying his face in his hands. He thought of all he had endured, years of dismissal, humiliation, condescension. He had dreamed of this moment all his life. Yet the triumph felt poisoned, shadowed by the danger of exposure. An inner voice whispered, "If you open it, you will not only uncover the heir, you will expose yourself to every vulture waiting above." He clenched his fists. "So be it," he muttered. The next day, Marcus returned with tools better suited for excavation: ropes, crowbars, brushes, items smuggled from the university stores under cover of night. The market was alive again with chatter, but fewer people laughed now when they saw him descend into the passage. Rumors had begun to stir, of strange markings, of whispers in the stones, of something ancient stirring below their feet. Some called him mad, others called him bold, but all were curious. By midday, Marcus pried at the sarcophagus lid, muscles straining, sweat streaming down his face. With a groan, the slab shifted. Dust spiraled upward in a ghostly cloud. His heart hammered as he slid the lantern close. Slowly, the darkness inside revealed its secrets. The body lay wrapped in faded linen, the fabric brittle with age. Yet, unlike most Roman burials, this corpse was adorned richly. A circlet of bronze upon the skull, fragments of armor across the chest, rings still clinging to bony fingers. Most shocking of all was a sealed scroll clutched in the figure's hands. Marcus's breath caught. A testament, perhaps the last words of the forgotten heir. He reached for it with trembling fingers, when the sound of boots scraped behind him. "Step away." Varro's voice, sharp as a blade. He stood at the chamber entrance, flanked not by students this time, but by two officials from the council, their torches blazing. His face was pale, his eyes wide, not with doubt now, but with the hunger of a man who saw history itself within his grasp. "This discovery is no longer yours," Varro declared. "You will surrender it, Petronius. If you resist, you will be ruined. They will call you a thief, a liar. But if you step aside, perhaps there will be a footnote in history with your name upon it." Marcus's chest tightened. Betrayal had come, just as he feared. His eyes fell to the scroll, the fragile parchment glowing faintly in the lantern's light. Everything he dreamed of proving, everything Rome had sought to erase, rested in those brittle fibers. If he handed it over, Varro would bury the truth again, claim the glory, silence the inconvenient details, reshape history for his pride. Marcus lifted his chin. "You cannot erase him again. Not while I breathe." The councilmen shifted uneasily. They had expected submission, not defiance. Varro's lips curled, venomous. "Then you have chosen ruin, boy." But Marcus felt no ruin in his bones. only resolve. His grandfather's voice seemed to echo in the chamber. The truth always waits, Marcus. It waits for those brave enough to bear it. He clutched the scroll to his chest, staring down the professor who had mocked him, threatened him, and now sought to steal what he had uncovered. Whatever price awaited, Marcus was ready. Weeks passed, and the marketplace above the tomb became a place of whispers. Vendors still sold figs and olives, children still darted between stalls, yet every glance seemed to stray toward the cobblestones where the young archaeologist had vanished night after night. The story spread like fire, of a sealed chamber, of treasures untouched, of inscriptions that hinted at an emperor lost to time. The truth could no longer be buried. At first, Professor Varro tried. He summoned the council, proclaimed that he had discovered the tomb, that the boy had been nothing more than an overeager assistant. Yet when the council questioned Marcus, his eyes did not falter. He laid the scroll before them, its ancient Latin words trembling on the parchment, declaring the existence of a claimant once erased from history. The counselors leaned over it, reading, their faces paling as the testimony unfolded. It spoke of betrayal, of Rome's cruelty, of a rightful heir condemned not for weakness, but for threatening those in power. The forgotten man's voice, silenced for 2 millennia, rose again from Marcus's hands. And when Varro sneered that the scroll was forgery, the council silenced him. Scholars were summoned. Experts examined the ink, the fibers, the seals. Their verdict was unanimous. Authentic, undeniable. Varro's fury boiled into desperation. He railed against Marcus, accused him of theft, of lies, of deceit. Yet the more he shouted, the smaller he seemed. For every word that dripped venom, Marcus stood calm, the weight of truth steadying his shoulders. The students who once snickered at him now watched with reverence. The merchants who had mocked him now called him the boy who found Rome's shadow. Even the common folk gathered, eager to glimpse the young man who had humbled the mighty professor. And Varro, his name, once spoken with awe, now carried only whispers of arrogance and disgrace. Stripped of his authority, he was left a relic himself, a monument to pride crumbling under the weight of truth. Marcus, however, did not bask in triumph. Instead, he returned to the tomb often, kneeling before the sarcophagus of the forgotten heir. He felt kinship there, as though across centuries the erased noble and the mocked archaeologist had met in shared silence. One evening, as lantern light flickered across the frescoes, Marcus whispered, "They could not silence you. They will not silence me. History belongs to those who dare to speak it." The air in the tomb seemed lighter, freer, as if the forgotten heir himself had been granted peace at last. Months later, Marcus published his findings. His name spread beyond the city, across Europe, across the world. He was no longer the boy mocked in lecture halls. He was the voice that restored what Rome had buried. Yet he never forgot the lesson carved deeper than stone. That arrogance blinds, but humility sees. That power can silence a name, but never a truth. And that even the humblest seeker can unearth what empires sought to hide. So when Marcus stood before a gathering of students, his voice rang steady. If you chase history for glory, you will find only dust. But if you chase it for truth, you may just awaken the forgotten. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about how extraordinary people turn humiliation into triumph.